Remember the smell of ground beef browning in your grandmother's cast iron skillet every Wednesday night? From 1920 to 2025, ground beef built America's dinner tables.
They converse pleasantly while Dad serves. I said pleasantly, for that is the keynote at dinner time.
But every generation cooked it completely differently. Some stretched 2 pounds to feed 12 people during the Depression. Some brought recipes from countries across the ocean. Some made dishes with ingredients that don't exist anymore. What they chose to make wasn't just dinner. It was survival, heritage, and love, shaped with their hands. 50 forgotten ground beef dishes. Each one reveals the generation that made it and the America they lived through. Let's begin with the first one. Walk into Grandma Rose's kitchen in 1952 and smell ground beef browning with cabbage. She started by heating her cast iron skillet and crumbling in a pound of ground beef. She cooked it until it was browned all over, about 8 minutes, then drained off most of the grease. She added a whole head of cabbage that she'd chopped into rough pieces, a chopped onion, a can of tomato sauce, salt, pepper, and a teaspoon of sugar. She covered the skillet and let it simmer for 30 minutes until the cabbage was soft and sweet. She served it in bowls with bread for sopping. The whole dish cost about 75 cents and fed 8 people. It tasted sweet from the cabbage and tangy from the tomatoes, the beef adding rich flavor throughout. Nobody makes beef and cabbage skillet anymore because cabbage became unfashionable and the whole dish seems too Depression-era poor. Over mashed potatoes, stand beside Grandma Betty's stove in 1948 and watch her make gravy from ground beef. She browned a pound of ground beef in her skillet, breaking it into small crumbles. She didn't drain the grease. She stirred in 3 tablespoons of flour and let it cook for 2 minutes until it started to brown. Then she slowly added 2 cups of milk, stirring constantly until it thickened into gravy, about 5 minutes. She seasoned it with salt and lots of black pepper. She served it ladled over mashed potatoes. The whole meal cost about 60 cents and fed 6 people. It tasted rich and creamy, the beef making the gravy substantial and filling. The black pepper gave it a little kick. Nobody makes hamburger gravy anymore because cream-based beef gravy seems old-fashioned, and the combination of ground beef with milk feels wrong to modern cooks who separate dairy from meat. Stand in Grandma Helen's kitchen in 1951 and watch her shape ground beef into steaks. She mixed a pound of ground beef with a beaten egg, half a cup of breadcrumbs, a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, salt and pepper. She shaped it into 4 oval patties about 1 inch thick. She browned them in a skillet with a little oil, about 4 minutes per side, then took them out. In the same skillet, she sliced 2 onions thin and cooked them until they were golden and soft, about 10 minutes. She stirred in 2 tablespoons of flour, let it brown, then added 2 cups of beef broth. She put the patties back in the gravy, covered the skillet, and simmered everything for 20 minutes. The whole meal cost about 80 cents and fed 4 people. It tasted rich and savory, the onion gravy sweet and thick. Nobody makes Salisbury steak at home anymore because it became TV dinner food. Walk into Grandma Margaret's kitchen in 1957 and smell bell peppers roasting. She cut the tops off 6 bell peppers and scooped out the seeds. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion, drained it, then stirred in 2 cups of cooked rice, a can of tomato sauce, salt, pepper, and a teaspoon of oregano. She stuffed each pepper full of the beef mixture and stood them upright in a baking pan. She poured a little water in the bottom of the pan, covered it with foil, and baked it at 375 degrees for 45 minutes until the peppers were tender. She served them with the tomato sauce from the pan spooned over. The whole meal cost about 90 cents and fed 6 people. The peppers tasted sweet and soft, the beef filling, savory, and rich. Nobody makes stuffed bell peppers anymore because they take too long and seem too fussy for a weeknight meal. Walk into Grandma Ruth's kitchen in 1963 and see her making the fancy Russian dish that became American. She browned a pound of ground beef with sliced mushrooms and a chopped onion. She drained most of the grease, then stirred in a tablespoon of flour and let it cook for a minute. She added a cup of beef broth and let it simmer until it thickened, about 10 minutes. She stirred in a cup of sour cream, a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, salt and pepper. She served it over egg noodles she'd boiled until tender. The whole meal cost about $1 and fed 6 people. It tasted rich and creamy, the mushrooms earthy, the sour cream tangy. The beef broth made it savory. Nobody makes ground beef stroganoff anymore because authentic stroganoff uses strips of beef, and using ground beef seems like a cheap shortcut that ruins the dish. 5 ground beef dishes down, 55 more to go. These weren't fancy restaurant meals. They were working mothers' solutions for feeding families on tight budgets. Keep watching because the next 55 dishes show you exactly how creative American women got with a pound of ground beef. Stand beside Grandma Joyce's stove in 1959 and watch her combine chili with macaroni. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion and a chopped green pepper. She added a can of kidney beans with their liquid, a can of tomato sauce, a tablespoon of chili powder, a teaspoon of cumin, salt and pepper. She let it simmer for 20 minutes. While it cooked, she boiled elbow macaroni until tender, about 8 minutes, then drained it. Walk into Grandma Evelyn's kitchen in 1954 and see her hollowing out tomatoes. She cut the tops off 6 large tomatoes and scooped out the insides with a spoon, leaving thick walls. She chopped the tomato insides and set them aside. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion, drained it, then stirred in a cup of cooked rice, the chopped tomato insides, a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, salt, pepper, and oregano. She stuffed each tomato shell full of the beef mixture and stood them in a baking pan. She baked them at 350 degrees for 30 minutes until the tomatoes were soft but still held their shape. She served them hot with the juice from the pan. The whole meal cost about $1 and fed 6 people. Stand in Grandma Carmen's kitchen in 1961 and smell the Cuban dish her mother taught her. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion and minced garlic. She added a can of tomato sauce, a quarter cup of raisins, a quarter cup of chopped green olives, a tablespoon of capers, a teaspoon of cumin, a bay leaf, salt and pepper. She let it simmer for 20 minutes until the flavors mixed together. She served it over white rice with fried plantains on the side. The whole meal cost about 90 cents and fed 6 people. It tasted sweet from the raisins, salty from the olives and capers, savory from the beef. The combination was completely unique. Nobody makes picadillo anymore because the mix of sweet raisins with savory beef and salty olives seems strange to American palates, and most people have never heard of this Cuban dish. Walk into Grandma Florence's kitchen in 1946 and see her dicing potatoes for hash. She peeled and diced 4 large potatoes into small cubes. She heated lard in her cast-iron skillet and browned a pound of ground beef, breaking it into crumbles. She didn't drain the grease. She added the diced potatoes, a chopped onion, salt, pepper, and a little water. She covered the skillet and let everything cook together for 25 minutes, stirring occasionally until the potatoes were tender and starting to get crispy on the bottom. She served it straight from the skillet. The whole meal cost about 50 cents and fed 6 people. It tasted rich and hearty, the potatoes soaking up all the beef flavor. The crispy bits on the bottom were the best part. Nobody makes beef and potato hash anymore because it seems too plain and poor. Just meat and potatoes mixed together without any sophistication. Stand beside Grandma Mary's stove in 1958 and watch her make the sandwich filling that got popular. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion and a chopped green pepper. She drained most of the grease, then stirred in a cup of ketchup, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, a tablespoon of yellow mustard, a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, salt and pepper. She let it simmer for 15 minutes until it thickened and the flavors blended. She served it spooned onto hamburger buns. The whole meal cost about 70 cents and fed 6 people. It tasted sweet and tangy, messy to eat. That's why they called them sloppy. The sauce dripping down your hands. The beef was soft and saucy. Nobody makes homemade sloppy joes anymore because canned manwich sauce took over, and making it from scratch seems pointless when the canned version tastes almost the same. 10 ground beef dishes that defined mid-century American cooking. These were the meals working mothers could make in 30 minutes after getting home from work. Keep watching, because the next 50 dishes show you ground beef recipes from immigrants who brought their country's flavors to American kitchens. Walk into Grandma Ilona's kitchen in 1952 and smell the Hungarian dish her mother taught her. She browned a pound of ground beef with 2 chopped onions. She added 2 tablespoons of paprika, the real Hungarian kind, not the bland American kind, a can of tomato sauce, a cup of beef broth, a teaspoon of caraway seeds, salt and pepper. She let it simmer for 30 minutes until it thickened. She cooked elbow macaroni separately, drained it, and stirred it into the beef mixture. She served it in bowls with sour cream dolloped on top. The whole meal cost about 80 cents and fed 8 people. It tasted rich and slightly spicy from all the paprika, the sour cream adding tanginess. The caraway seeds gave it an unusual flavor. Nobody makes real beef goulash anymore because American goulash became just beef and macaroni and tomatoes, losing all the Hungarian spices that made it authentic. Stand in Grandma Mabel's Iowa kitchen in 1956 and watch her make the sandwich her town was famous for. She browned a pound of ground beef in a skillet, breaking it into very fine crumbles. She added a cup of beef broth, 2 tablespoons of yellow mustard, a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, a teaspoon of sugar, salt and pepper. She let it simmer for 15 minutes until most of the liquid evaporated, but the meat was still moist and loose. She served it on hamburger buns with pickles and onions. The whole meal cost about 60 cents and fed 6 people. It tasted savory and slightly tangy from the mustard, the meat loose and juicy instead of formed into a patty. Nobody makes loose meat sandwiches anymore because they never became popular outside Iowa and Nebraska, and most people think they're just deconstructed hamburgers that make a mess. Walk into Grandma Astrid's kitchen in 1960 and see her rolling tiny meatballs. She mixed a pound of ground beef with a beaten egg, half a cup of breadcrumbs soaked in milk, a tablespoon of grated onion, a 1/4 teaspoon of allspice, a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, salt and pepper. She rolled the mixture into meatballs about 1 inch across. She browned them in butter in her skillet, then took them out. In the same skillet, she made gravy by stirring flour into the drippings, then slowly adding cream and beef broth. She put the meatballs back in the gravy and simmered them for 15 minutes. She served them over egg noodles. The whole meal cost about $1 and fed 6 people. They tasted rich and creamy, the allspice and nutmeg making them sweet and spicy. Nobody makes Swedish meatballs at home anymore because they became frozen appetizers at IKEA. Stand beside Grandma Agnes's stove in 1949 and watch her make the Irish dish that became American. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion and a diced carrot. She drained most of the grease, then stirred in a cup of beef gravy that she made from bouillon, a cup of frozen peas, a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, salt and pepper. She spread it in a baking dish. She made mashed potatoes from 4 large potatoes, mashing them with butter and milk until they were smooth. She spread the mashed potatoes over the beef mixture, making peaks with her fork. She baked it at 375 degrees for 25 minutes until the potatoes were golden on top. The whole meal cost about 80 cents and fed 6 people. It tasted rich and comforting, the creamy potatoes and savory beef perfect together. Nobody makes shepherd's pie anymore because it takes too many steps and seems too British. Walk into Grandma Lucille's kitchen in 1955 and see her making the Tex-Mex dish that got popular. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion and a chopped green pepper. She drained it, then stirred in a can of whole kernel corn with its liquid, a can of tomato sauce, a tablespoon of chili powder, a teaspoon of cumin, salt and pepper. She spread it in a baking dish. She made cornmeal topping by mixing a cup of cornmeal, a cup of milk, an egg, a teaspoon of baking powder, and salt. She poured it over the beef mixture. She baked it at 375 degrees for 30 minutes until the cornmeal was set and golden. The whole meal cost about 70 cents and fed 8 people. It tasted spicy and slightly sweet from the cornmeal topping like cornbread. Nobody makes tamale pie anymore because it's not authentic Mexican food and seems like confused Americana. Rehook 15 ground beef dishes from 15 different traditions. American women took ground beef and made it into Swedish, Hungarian, Irish, Mexican, and Cuban meals. Keep watching because the next 45 dishes show you even more creative ways immigrants and regional cooks transformed cheap ground beef into their heritage. Stand in Grandma Clara's kitchen in 1953 and watch her make the one-pot meal that saved time. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion in her big skillet. She didn't drain the grease. She added 2 cups of uncooked elbow macaroni, a can of tomato sauce, 2 cups of water, a teaspoon of garlic powder, salt and pepper. She brought it to a boil, then reduced the heat, covered it, and let it simmer for 15 minutes until the macaroni was tender and it absorbed most of the liquid. She stirred in a cup of shredded cheddar cheese until it melted. She served it straight from the skillet. The whole meal cost about 70 cents and fed 6 people. It tasted rich and cheesy, the tomato sauce coating the macaroni and beef. Nobody makes beef and macaroni skillet anymore because it seems too much like a hamburger helper from a box. Walk into Grandma Pauline's kitchen in 1958 and see her rolling beef, filling in cabbage leaves. She cored a head of cabbage and boiled it until the leaves were soft enough to peel off without tearing, about 10 minutes. She mixed a pound of ground beef with a cup of cooked rice, a beaten egg, a chopped onion, salt and pepper. She put a spoonful of filling on each cabbage leaf, folded in the sides, and rolled it up tight. She placed them seam side down in a pot, packed close together. She poured a quart of tomato juice over them, added a tablespoon of brown sugar, and simmered them covered for an hour. She served them with the tomato sauce. The whole meal cost about $1 and fed 8 people. They tasted sweet and tangy, the cabbage soft, the beef filling savory. Nobody makes cabbage rolls anymore because rolling each one takes forever, and cabbage went out of style. Stand beside Grandma Rosa's stove in 1962 and smell the New Mexican dish she grew up eating. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion and minced garlic. She drained it, then stirred in a tablespoon of chili powder, a teaspoon of cumin, salt and pepper. She heated corn tortillas in oil for a few seconds to soften them. She dipped each tortilla in red chili sauce, filled it with the beef mixture and some shredded cheese, rolled it up, and placed it seam side down in a baking dish. She covered them with more chili sauce and cheese. She baked them at 350 degrees for 20 minutes until the cheese melted and everything was bubbly. The whole meal cost about 90 cents and fed 6 people. They tasted spicy and rich, the corn tortillas soft, the beef filling savory. Nobody makes beef enchiladas from scratch anymore because store-bought kits took over and making your own chili sauce seems too hard. Walk into Grandma Eleanor's Ohio kitchen in 1956 and watch her make the casserole named after a Columbus restaurant owner. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion and a chopped green pepper. She drained it, then stirred in a can of tomato soup. a can of mushroom soup, a cup of shredded cheddar cheese, and a cup of cooked egg noodles. She spread it in a baking dish, topped it with more cheese, and baked it at 350 degrees for 30 minutes until it was bubbly. She served it with garlic bread. The whole meal cost about $1 and fed 8 people. It tasted creamy and rich from the 2 soups, the cheese making it gooey, the tomato and mushroom flavors mixed together. Nobody makes Johnny Marzetti anymore because it never became popular outside Ohio, and the name sounds strange, and condensed soup casseroles fell completely out of fashion. Stand in Grandma Yolanda's kitchen in 1965 and see her making burritos the way she learned in Arizona. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion and minced garlic. She drained it, then stirred in a can of refried beans, a tablespoon of chili powder, a teaspoon of cumin, salt and pepper. She heated it all together until it was hot and mixed well. She warmed flour tortillas on her griddle until they were soft and pliable. She spread the beef and bean mixture down the center of each tortilla, added shredded cheese and lettuce, folded in the sides, and rolled them up tight. She served them with salsa and sour cream. The whole meal cost about 80 cents and fed 6 people. They tasted spicy and filling, the beans making the beef go further. The flour tortillas were soft and chewy. Nobody makes beef and bean burritos at home anymore because Taco Bell made them fast food. Rehook, 20 ground beef dishes that crossed borders and cultures. These weren't restaurant recipes. They were home cooks adapting their heritage to American ingredients. Keep watching because the next 40 dishes show you regional American ground beef recipes that have completely disappeared from modern kitchens. Walk into Grandma Hazel's kitchen in 1951 and see her cutting acorn squash in half. She scooped out the seeds and placed the halves cut side up in a baking pan with a little water in the bottom. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion, drained it, then stirred in a cup of cooked rice, a tablespoon of brown sugar, salt, pepper, and cinnamon. She filled each squash half with the beef mixture, covered the pan with foil, and baked it at 375 degrees for 50 minutes until the squash was tender. She served each person half a squash. The whole meal cost about 90 cents and fed 4 people. The squash tasted sweet and soft, the beef filling savory with a hint of sweetness from the brown sugar and cinnamon. Nobody makes stuffed squash anymore because acorn squash went out of style, and the sweet-savory combination seems odd to modern tastes. Stand beside Grandma June's stove in 1959 and watch her make the fake Chinese food that became American. She browned a pound of ground beef, drained it, then pushed it to the side of her skillet. She added sliced celery, a sliced onion, a can of bean sprouts, drained, and a can of water chestnuts, sliced. She stir-fried the vegetables for 5 minutes. She mixed 2 tablespoons of cornstarch with a 1/4 cup of soy sauce and a cup of beef broth, poured it over everything, and stirred until it thickened, about 3 minutes. She served it over white rice with crunchy chow mein noodles on top. The whole meal cost about 80 cents and fed 6 people. It tasted salty from the soy sauce, crunchy from the vegetables and noodles. The water chestnuts added texture. Nobody makes chop suey anymore because it's not real Chinese food, and authentic Chinese restaurants made it embarrassing. Walk into Grandma Linda's kitchen in 1968 and see her making the Tex-Mex salad that got trendy. She browned a pound of ground beef with taco seasoning that she mixed herself from chili powder, cumin, garlic powder, onion powder, paprika. She drained it and let it cool slightly. She filled a bowl with shredded iceberg lettuce, diced tomatoes, shredded cheddar cheese, and the seasoned ground beef. She crushed up corn chips and sprinkled them on top. She served it with Catalina dressing mixed with a little salsa. The whole meal cost about 90 cents and fed 6 people. It tasted crunchy from the chips and lettuce, savory and spicy from the beef, tangy from the dressing. The cheese made it rich. Nobody makes taco salad at home anymore because it became fast food restaurant fare, and the corn chips getting soggy ruins it if you don't eat it immediately. Stand in Grandma Alice's kitchen in 1964 and watch her use leftover rice to make fried rice. She heated oil in her big skillet and scrambled 2 eggs, breaking them into small pieces. She pushed them to the side, added a pound of ground beef, and browned it. She added 3 cups of cold cooked rice that she'd made the day before, a cup of frozen mixed vegetables, 3 tablespoons of soy sauce, and a teaspoon of sesame oil. She stirred everything together over high heat for 5 minutes until the rice was hot and starting to get crispy on the bottom. She served it in bowls. The whole meal cost about 70 cents and fed 6 people. It tasted salty and savory from the soy sauce, the sesame oil adding nuttiness. The rice had crispy bits mixed with soft bits. Nobody makes beef fried rice anymore because fried rice became a way to use leftover Chinese takeout, and ground beef seems too American for Asian food. Walk into Grandma Edith's kitchen in 1947 and see her making fake steak from ground beef. She mixed a pound of ground beef with a cup of saltine cracker crumbs, a cup of milk, salt, and pepper. She shaped it into a rectangle about 1 inch thick on a plate and refrigerated it for an hour until it was firm. She cut it into serving-size pieces that looked like cube steaks. She dredged each piece in flour and browned them in oil in her skillet, about 4 minutes per side. She made cream gravy from the drippings by stirring in flour and adding milk. She served the mock steaks with the gravy poured over. The whole meal cost about 50 cents and fed 6 people. They tasted tender and rich, the cracker crumbs making the texture more like steak. The gravy made it special. Nobody makes poor man's steak anymore because the name sounds too Depression era, and the concept of fake steak seems sad. Stand beside Grandma Virginia's stove in 1960 and watch her make stuffed baked potatoes. She baked 6 large russet potatoes at 400 degrees for an hour until they were tender. While they baked, she browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion, drained it, then stirred in a cup of sour cream, a cup of shredded cheddar cheese, salt, pepper, and chopped green onions. When the potatoes were done, she cut them in half lengthwise, scooped out most of the insides into a bowl, mashed them with butter and milk, then mixed them with the beef mixture. She filled each potato skin with the mixture, topped them with more cheese, and baked them for 15 more minutes until the cheese melted. The whole meal cost about $1 and fed 6 people. They tasted rich and creamy, the potato skins crispy, the beef filling, savory, and cheesy. Nobody makes beef-stuffed potatoes anymore because twice-baked potatoes became side dishes without meat. Walk into Grandma Patricia's kitchen in 1954 and smell spaghetti sauce simmering. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion and minced garlic. She didn't drain it. She added 2 cans of tomato sauce, a can of tomato paste, a tablespoon of sugar, 2 teaspoons of dried oregano, a teaspoon of dried basil, a bay leaf, salt and pepper. She let it simmer uncovered for an hour, stirring occasionally until it thickened and the flavors blended. She boiled spaghetti until tender, drained it, and served the sauce ladled over the noodles with Parmesan cheese. The whole meal cost about 80 cents and fed 8 people. It tasted rich and slightly sweet, the oregano and basil making it Italian. The long simmering made it thick. Nobody makes American-style spaghetti sauce anymore because Italian grandmas shamed everyone for adding sugar, and authentic Italian cooking became the standard, making this sauce seem wrong. Stand in Grandma Josephine's kitchen in 1963 and see her hollowing out zucchini. She cut 4 large zucchini in half lengthwise and scooped out the centers with a spoon, leaving thick walls. She chopped the zucchini insides and set them aside. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion. and the chopped zucchini insides. She drained it, then stirred in a cup of cooked rice, a can of tomato sauce, a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, salt and pepper. She filled each zucchini half with the beef mixture, placed them in a baking dish, covered them with foil, and baked at 350 degrees for 35 minutes until the zucchini was tender. She topped them with mozzarella cheese and baked 5 more minutes. The whole meal cost about 90 cents and fed 8 people. The zucchini tasted mild and soft, the beef filling savory and rich. Nobody makes stuffed zucchini anymore because zucchini became underappreciated and the dish takes too much prep work. Walk into Grandma Martha's kitchen in 1957 and smell vegetable soup with ground beef. She browned a pound of ground beef in her soup pot, drained most of the grease, then added a chopped onion, 3 diced carrots, 3 diced celery stalks, and 2 diced potatoes. She added a can of tomatoes, 4 cups of beef broth, a bay leaf, a teaspoon of thyme, salt and pepper. She brought it to a boil, then reduced the heat and simmered it for 30 minutes until all the vegetables were tender. She served it in bowls with crackers. The whole meal cost about 70 cents and fed 8 people. It tasted hearty and rich, all the vegetables soft and flavorful in the beef broth. The ground beef made it substantial. Nobody makes hamburger soup anymore because it seems too much like throwing everything in a pot without sophistication, and ground beef in soup went out of style when people started wanting chunks of meat. Stand beside Grandma Eleanor's stove in 1950 and watch her cook barley with ground beef. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion in her big skillet. She didn't drain the grease. She added a cup of pearl barley, 3 cups of beef broth, a can of tomato sauce, a teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce, salt and pepper. She brought it to a boil, then reduced the heat, covered it, and simmered it for 45 minutes until the barley was tender and had absorbed most of the liquid. She stirred occasionally to keep it from sticking. She served it from the skillet. The whole meal cost about 60 cents and fed 6 people. The barley tasted chewy and nutty, the beef making it rich. The tomato sauce added tang. Nobody makes beef and barley anymore because barley became old-fashioned and seems too Depression-era, and rice replaced it for stretching meat. 30 ground beef dishes that American women relied on every week. These weren't special occasion meals. They were Tuesday night dinners, budget stretchers, family favorites. Keep watching because the next 30 dishes show you the most creative, unusual, and forgotten ground beef recipes that have completely vanished from cookbooks. Walk into Grandma Lillian's kitchen in 1955 and see her making a savory pie. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion, drained it, then stirred in a can of cream-style corn, a can of whole kernel corn, drained, a beaten egg, salt, pepper, and a tablespoon of sugar. She spread it in a deep baking dish. She made biscuit dough from 2 cups of flour, a tablespoon of baking powder, a teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 cup of shortening, and 3/4 cup of milk. She rolled it out and placed it over the beef mixture like a pie crust, cutting slits for steam to escape. She baked it at 400 degrees for 25 minutes until the biscuit top was golden brown. The whole meal cost about 70 cents and fed 6 people. The corn tasted sweet, the beef savory, the biscuit topping fluffy and buttery. Nobody makes corn and beef pie anymore because sweet corn with meat seems confused and pot pies became chicken territory. Stand beside Grandma Frances's stove in 1961 and watch her make the creamy pasta dish. She browned a pound of ground beef with sliced mushrooms, drained it, then stirred in a can of cream of mushroom soup, a cup of sour cream, half a cup of chicken broth, a 1/4 cup of sherry, salt and pepper. She cooked spaghetti until tender, drained it, and mixed it with the beef sauce. She spread it in a baking dish, topped it with Parmesan cheese and breadcrumbs, and baked it at 350 degrees for 25 minutes until it was bubbly and golden on top. She served it from the dish. The whole meal cost about $1 and fed 8 people. It tasted rich and creamy, the mushrooms earthy, the sherry adding depth. The parmesan and breadcrumbs made a crunchy topping. Nobody makes beef tetrazzini anymore because authentic tetrazzini uses chicken or turkey, and using ground beef seems like a cheap shortcut that ruins the elegance of the dish. Walk into Grandma Barbara's kitchen in 1958 and smell chili cooking. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion and a chopped green pepper. She drained most of the grease, then added 2 cans of kidney beans with their liquid, a can of tomato sauce, a tablespoon of chili powder, a teaspoon of cumin, a teaspoon of oregano, a bay leaf, salt and pepper. She let it simmer uncovered for 30 minutes, stirring occasionally, until it thickened. She served it in bowls with shredded cheese, chopped onions, and saltine crackers. The whole meal cost about 70 cents and fed 8 people. It tasted spicy and rich, the beans creamy, the tomato sauce tangy. The long simmering made all the flavors blend together. Nobody makes simple kidney bean chili anymore because chili became competitive with dozens of ingredients and secret spices, making this basic version seem unsophisticated and wrong. Stand in Grandma Angelina's kitchen in 1964 and see her stuffing pasta tube. She boiled manicotti shells until they were just tender enough to handle, about 7 minutes. Then drained them carefully. She browned a pound of ground beef with minced garlic, drained it, then mixed it with a container of ricotta cheese, a cup of shredded mozzarella, a beaten egg, a handful of chopped parsley, salt and pepper. She carefully filled each manicotti shell with the beef and cheese mixture, using a small spoon. She spread a cup of marinara sauce in the bottom of a baking dish, arranged the stuffed shells on top, covered them with more sauce, and topped everything with mozzarella. She baked it at 375 degrees for 30 minutes. The whole meal cost about $1 and fed 6 people. The pasta was tender, the filling rich and cheesy with savory beef. Nobody makes beef-stuffed manicotti anymore because cheese manicotti became the standard, and adding beef seems too heavy. Walk into Grandma Carol's kitchen in 1962 and watch her layer a baked dish. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion, drained it, then stirred in a can of tomato sauce, a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, salt and pepper. She cooked egg noodles until tender and drained them. She mixed a container of cottage cheese with a beaten egg and a handful of chopped parsley. In a baking dish, she layered half the noodles, all the cottage cheese mixture, the rest of the noodles, then all the beef sauce. She topped it with shredded cheddar cheese and baked it at 350 degrees for 30 minutes until bubbly. The whole meal cost about 90 cents and fed 8 people. It tasted rich and creamy, the cottage cheese adding tang and protein. The layers looked fancy. Nobody makes beef and noodle bake with cottage cheese anymore because cottage cheese in hot dishes seems wrong to modern cooks who only eat it cold. 35 ground beef dishes that showed up at every church potluck and family dinner. These were the recipes women traded at Bridge Club and wrote on index cards. Keep watching because the next 25 dishes are the most unusual ground beef recipes you've ever heard of. Stand beside Grandma Gertrude's stove in 1953 and smell sauerkraut cooking with beef. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion in her big skillet. She didn't drain the grease. She added a jar of sauerkraut with its juice, a peeled and diced apple, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, a teaspoon of caraway seeds, salt and pepper. She covered it and let it simmer for 25 minutes until the flavors mixed and the apple was soft. She served it with boiled potatoes. The whole meal cost about 70 cents and fed 6 people. It tasted tangy from the sauerkraut, sweet from the apple and brown sugar, the caraway seeds adding a distinctive flavor. The beef made it hearty. Nobody makes beef and sauerkraut anymore because sauerkraut went out of style completely, except for hot dog, and the combination of beef with sour cabbage and apples seems too German and old-fashioned. Walk into Grandma Shirley's kitchen in 1967 and see her making a crustless pie. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion, drained it, then spread it in a greased pie pan. She mixed 2 beaten eggs with a cup of milk, a quarter cup of flour for biscuit, salt and pepper, and poured it over the beef. She baked it at 375 degrees for 25 minutes until it was set. She topped it with sliced tomatoes and shredded cheddar cheese and baked 5 more minutes until the cheese melted. She cut it into wedges and served it. The whole meal cost about 80 cents and fed 6 people. It tasted like a cheeseburger without the bun, the custard holding everything together. The tomatoes added freshness. Nobody makes cheeseburger pie anymore because the name sounds childish and the concept of burger filling in a pie seems bizarre and desperate. Stand in Grandma Helen's kitchen in 1956 and watch her cook lentils with ground beef. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion and 2 diced carrots. She didn't drain the grease. She added a cup of dried lentils, 4 cups of beef broth, a can of tomato sauce, a bay leaf, a teaspoon of thyme, salt and pepper. She brought it to a boil, then reduced the heat and simmered it covered for 40 minutes until the lentils were tender and the stew was thick. She served it in bowls with bread. The whole meal cost about 60 cents and fed 8 people. It tasted earthy and rich, the lentils soft and creamy, the beef making it hearty, the tomato added tang. Nobody makes beef and lentil stew anymore because lentils became vegetarian food and putting meat in them seems to miss the point, and most Americans still don't know how to cook lentils. Walk into Grandma Doris's kitchen in 1959 and smell curry powder. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion and a peeled, diced apple. She drained most of the grease, then stirred in 2 tablespoons of curry powder, a tablespoon of flour, and let it cook for a minute. She slowly added 2 cups of beef broth, stirring constantly. She added a quarter cup of raisins and let it simmer for 20 minutes until it thickened. She served it over white rice with chutney on the side. The whole meal cost about 80 cents and fed 6 people. It tasted spicy and sweet at the same time, the curry making it exotic. The apple and raisins added texture and sweetness. Nobody makes beef curry anymore because curry became associated with Indian restaurants using authentic spices and cooking methods, making this Americanized version with ground beef seem embarrassing and culturally appropriative. Stand beside Grandma Gloria's stove in 1966 and watch her fry corn tortillas. She heated oil in her skillet and fried corn tortillas one at a time until they were crispy and golden, about 2 minutes per side. She drained them on paper towels. She browned a pound of ground beef with taco seasoning and a little water until it was thick and flavorful. She spread refried beans on each crispy tortilla, topped it with the seasoned ground beef, shredded lettuce, diced tomatoes, shredded cheese, and a dollop of sour cream. She served them on plates. The whole meal cost about 90 cents and fed 6 people. They tasted crunchy from the fried tortilla, the layers of toppings fresh and flavorful. The beef was spicy and savory. Nobody makes homemade tostadas anymore because Taco Bell made them fast food, and frying tortillas at home seems too messy and time-consuming when you can buy tostada shells. 40 ground beef dishes from 40 different American kitchens. Every region, every immigrant group, every generation had their own way of cooking ground beef. Keep watching because the final 20 dishes are the most creative, most unusual, and most forgotten ground beef recipes that will never return. Walk into Grandma Bernice's kitchen in 1960 and watch her make the impressive rolled dish she served for company. She mixed 2 pounds of ground beef with 2 beaten eggs, a cup of breadcrumbs, half a cup of grated Parmesan cheese, minced garlic, salt and pepper. She pressed it out on a piece of wax paper into a rectangle about half an inch thick, roughly 10 inches by 12 inches. She cooked 2 packages of frozen chopped spinach, squeezed out all the water and mixed it with a container of ricotta cheese, a beaten egg, more Parmesan, salt, pepper, and nutmeg. She spread the spinach mixture evenly over the beef rectangle, leaving an inch border on all sides. Using the wax paper to help, she carefully rolled the beef up from the short end like a jelly roll, making sure the spinach filling stayed inside. She seasoned sealed the seam and ends by pinching the meat together. She placed it seam side down in a baking pan, brushed it with oil, and baked it at 350 degrees for an hour until the beef was cooked through and browned. She let it rest for 10 minutes, then sliced it into rounds that showed the green spiral of spinach inside the beef. She served it with marinara sauce. The whole dish cost about $2 and fed 8 people. It looked fancy, the spiral beautiful on the plate. It tasted rich and savory, the beef seasoned well, the spinach filling creamy and flavorful. Nobody makes beef and spinach roll anymore because it takes too much time and skill to roll it without the filling leaking out. Walk into Grandma Phyllis's kitchen on Valentine's Day, 1965, and see her making a heart-shaped meatloaf for her family. She mixed 2 pounds of ground beef with a cup of breadcrumbs, 2 beaten eggs, half a cup of ketchup, a chopped onion, a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, salt, pepper, and a teaspoon of garlic powder. Instead of forming it into a regular loaf, she shaped it into a heart on a baking sheet with raised edges. She took a pound of bacon and wove the strips over and under each other on a cutting board to create a bacon lattice, like a pie crust. She carefully lifted the bacon weave and laid it over the heart-shaped meatloaf, tucking the ends underneath. She brushed the top with more ketchup mixed with brown sugar. She baked it at 350 degrees for an hour and 15 minutes until the meat was cooked through and the bacon was crispy. The bacon grease dripped down the sides and collected in the pan. She let it rest for 10 minutes, then carefully transferred it to a platter, keeping the heart shape intact. The whole dish cost about $2 and fed 8 people. It looked impressive, the bacon weave golden and crispy, the heart shape recognizable. It tasted rich and savory, the bacon adding smokiness and salt. The ketchup glaze was sweet and tangy. Nobody makes decorative-shaped meatloaves with bacon weaves anymore because it seems too extra, and 50s housewife trying too hard to make meatloaf special. Also, the bacon weave technique takes patience and skill, and modern cooks would rather just lay bacon strips on top. The heart shape seems corny, and the whole concept feels like something from a vintage magazine that nobody actually made except for photos. Stand beside Grandma Joyce's oven in 1968 and watch her assemble the casserole that became popular. She browned 2 pounds of ground beef with a chopped onion in a big skillet, drained most of the grease, then stirred in a can of cream of mushroom soup, a can of cream of chicken soup, a cup of sour cream, salt and pepper. She spread this beef mixture in the bottom of a 9 by 13 baking dish. She opened 2 bags of frozen hash brown potatoes and layered them over the beef mixture. She mixed a can of cheddar cheese soup with half a cup of milk and poured it evenly over the hash brown. She covered the whole thing with foil and baked it at 350 degrees for 45 minutes. She took off the foil, topped the casserole with 2 cups of shredded cheddar cheese and a can of French fried onions. She baked it uncovered for 15 more minutes until the cheese melted and the onions were golden brown. She let it sit for 10 minutes before cutting into squares. The whole dish cost about $2 and fed 12 people. The hash browns were creamy on the bottom and slightly crispy on top. The beef was rich and creamy from all the soups and sour cream. The French fried onions added crunch and onion flavor. Nobody makes this exact casserole anymore because it became a cliché of condensed soup cooking, and using 3 different canned soups seems excessive and processed. Also, the frozen hash browns release water that makes the casserole sometimes soupy. Walk into Grandma Sandra's kitchen in 1963 and watch her make the homemade version of what would become Chef Boyardee's famous product. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion and minced garlic in a big pot. She didn't drain the grease. She added a large can of tomato sauce, a small can of tomato paste, 2 cups of water, a tablespoon of sugar, 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning, a teaspoon of garlic powder, a bay leaf, salt, and pepper. She brought it to a boil, then reduced the heat and let it simmer for 20 minutes to develop the flavors. Then she added 2 cups of uncooked elbow macaroni right into the pot. She stirred it well, covered the pot, and simmered everything together for 15 minutes, stirring occasionally. until the macaroni was tender and had absorbed most of the liquid. She stirred in a cup of shredded cheddar cheese until it melted into the sauce. She served it straight from the pot into bowls, with more cheese on top if people wanted it. The whole meal cost about 70 cents and fed 8 people. It tasted rich and tomatoey, the pasta soft and coated in the beef sauce. The cheese made it creamy and rich. The flavors were simple but satisfying. Nobody makes homemade beefaroni anymore because the canned version became so ubiquitous that making it from scratch seems pointless. Why spend time cooking it when you can open a can? The dish also became associated with children's food and poverty meals, losing any appeal to adults. The name beefaroni is trademarked, so home cooks can't even call it that. 45 ground beef dishes that defined American home cooking for 50 years. These weren't restaurant recipes. They were family favorites, budget stretchers, weeknight solutions. The final 15 dishes are the most unusual, most creative, and most forgotten ground beef recipes that will blow your mind. Walk into Grandma Lorraine's kitchen in 1961 and see her rolling meat pinwheels. She made biscuit dough from 2 cups of bisquick and 2/3 cup of milk. She rolled it out into a large rectangle about a 1/4 inch thick on a floured surface. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion, drained it, and let it cool slightly. She mixed it with 1/2 cup of shredded cheddar cheese, a tablespoon of chopped parsley, salt, and pepper. She spread the beef mixture evenly over the biscuit dough rectangle, leaving a 1-inch border on all sides. Starting from a long edge, she carefully rolled the dough up tightly, like a jelly roll. She cut the roll into 1-inch slices, creating pinwheels that showed the spiral of beef inside. She laid the pinwheels cut side up in a greased baking dish, packing them close together. She poured a can of tomato sauce mixed with a teaspoon of Italian seasoning over the pinwheels, making sure the sauce got between them. She covered the dish with foil and baked it at 375 degrees for 30 minutes. She uncovered it, topped it with more cheese, and baked 10 more minutes. The whole meal cost about 80 cents and fed 6 people. The pinwheels were tender and fluffy, the spiral of beef visible in each slice. The tomato sauce made them moist and flavorful. Nobody makes beef pinwheels anymore because they're fiddly to make and seem too Betty Crocker 50s. The presentation looks impressive but takes time and skill, and modern cooks would rather just make a regular beef dish. Also, the biscuit dough can be tough if overworked, and the rolls sometimes unwind during baking, ruining the spiral effect. Stand beside Grandma Pearl's oven in 1955 and watch her layer potatoes with ground beef. She peeled and sliced 6 large potatoes very thin, about 1/8 of an inch. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion, breaking it into fine crumbles. She drained most of the grease and seasoned the beef with salt, pepper, and a teaspoon of paprika. In a greased casserole dish, she made layers. First, a layer of sliced potatoes, slightly overlapping, then a layer of the ground beef mixture, then another layer of potato. She repeated until everything was used, ending with potatoes on top. She made a white sauce by melting 3 tablespoons of butter, stirring in 3 tablespoons of flour, cooking it for a minute, then slowly adding 2½ cups of milk while stirring constantly until it thickened. She seasoned it with salt and pepper. She poured the white sauce evenly over the layered potatoes and beef, making sure it seeped down between the layers. She covered the dish with foil and baked it at 350 degrees for an hour. Then she uncovered it and baked 30 more minutes until the potatoes were tender and the top was golden brown. The whole meal cost about $1 and fed 8 people. The potatoes were creamy and soft, the beef savory between the layers. The white sauce held everything together, rich and smooth. Nobody makes beef and potato scallop anymore because scalloped potatoes became a side dish without meat, and the combination of beef with creamy potatoes seems too heavy and rich for modern tastes. Also, making white sauce from scratch intimidates people, and the dish takes 90 minutes to bake, too long for weeknight cooking. Walk into Grandma Edna's kitchen in 1964 and smell curry cooking. She browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion and a peeled, diced apple in her skillet. She drained most of the grease, then stirred in 2 tablespoons of curry powder and let it cook for a minute to toast the spices. She added a cup of beef broth, a cup of frozen peas and carrots, a 1/4 cup of raisins, and a tablespoon of mango chutney. She let it simmer for 15 minutes until it thickened and the vegetables were tender. While the curry cooked, she boiled 4 large potatoes until they were tender, about 20 minutes. She drained them and mashed them with butter, milk, salt, and pepper until they were smooth and fluffy. She spread the hot beef curry in the bottom of a deep baking dish. She carefully spread the mashed potatoes over the top, making peaks and swirls with a fork. She dotted the top with butter and baked it at 400 degrees for 20 minutes until the potato peaks were golden brown. She served it by scooping through both layers. The whole meal cost about 90 cents and fed 6 people. The curry filling was spicy and sweet with raisins and chutney, the mashed potato topping creamy and rich, golden and crusty on top. Nobody makes beef curry pot pie anymore because the combination of Indian curry with English shepherd's pie seems culturally confused and wrong. Curry became associated with authentic Indian cuisine, making this anglicized version with ground beef and raisins embarrassing. Also, the sweet-savory mix of curry with mashed potatoes seems odd, and most people can't imagine putting raisins in a meat dish. Walk into Grandma Constance's kitchen in 1969 and watch her make the fancy-looking ground beef dish for company. She mixed 2 pounds of ground beef with a cup of breadcrumbs, 2 beaten eggs, half a cup of milk, a chopped onion, a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, salt, pepper, and a teaspoon of garlic powder. She shaped it into a firm, smooth loaf and baked it at 350 degrees for 45 minutes. She let it cool completely. While the meatloaf cooled, she made mushroom duxelles by finely chopping a pound of mushrooms and cooking them in butter with minced garlic until all their liquid evaporated and they became a paste, about 20 minutes. She let that cool too. She bought a package of refrigerated crescent roll dough and rolled it out on a floured surface, pressing the perforations together to make one large sheet. She spread the mushroom mixture over the dough. She placed the cooled meatloaf in the center and wrapped the dough around it, sealing the seams. She brushed the dough with beaten egg. She baked it at 375 degrees for 25 minutes until the pastry was golden brown and flaky. She let it rest for 10 minutes, then sliced it to show the layers: golden pastry, mushroom layer, meatloaf center. The whole dish cost about $3 and fed 8 people. It looked impressive and fancy, the layers visible in each slice. The pastry was buttery and flaky, the mushrooms earthy, the meatloaf savory and tender. Nobody makes poor man's beef Wellington anymore because it seems like a cheap imitation of the real thing, which uses beef tenderloin, and using ground beef instead of a fine cut of beef seems sad and wrong. Also, true beef Wellington intimidates home cooks, so attempting a ground beef version seems pointless. The crescent roll dough instead of puff pastry marks it as budget cooking, and the whole concept seems stuck in the 60s when people tried to make cheap ingredients look elegant. So why did they disappear? Several reasons. First, processed food took over. Why make hamburger gravy from scratch when you can open a can of condensed soup? Why make beef stroganoff when frozen dinners exist? Why make sloppy joes when canned manwich sauce is faster? Second, culinary standards changed. These dishes became embarrassing symbols of unsophisticated 50s cooking. Using canned soup, cream of mushroom, Bisquick, and frozen hash browns marked you as someone who didn't know real cooking. Third, ethnic food became authentic. American-style chop suey, goulash, and curry with raisins became culturally appropriative embarrassments when real Chinese, Hungarian, and Indian restaurants arrived. Fourth, ground beef itself fell out of favor. Health concerns about red meat and fat made ground beef seem unhealthy. The rise of organic, grass-fed, and ethical meat made cheap ground beef seem low quality and industrial. Ground beef became associated with fast food, burgers, tacos, processed meat, rather than home cooking. Fifth, the techniques disappeared. The daughters and granddaughters who grew up eating these dishes refused to learn them. Why would you want to make cabbage rolls when they reminded you of poverty? Why make poor man's steak when you could afford real steak? Why stuff onions when onions seemed too strong and old-fashioned? An entire generation rejected these recipes as reminders of hard times they wanted to forget. But these 60 ground beef dishes deserve to be remembered, not necessarily because we should cook them again, though some are delicious, but because they show us who our grandmothers were. They were resourceful cooks who turned a pound of ground beef into Swedish meatballs one night, tamale pie the next, and beef Wellington the third. They were immigrant women who adapted their heritage to American ingredients. They were budget managers who fed families on almost nothing. They were artists who made cheap ingredients look fancy for company. These 60 forgotten ground beef dishes are their legacy. They're proof that creativity doesn't require expensive ingredients, that good cooking is about skill and ingenuity, and that love tastes just as good in a hamburger gravy as it does in a fancy restaurant meal. Remember them.